Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, man.
You got it. My pleasure. Great to be with you guys.
Yeah, this guy aside of me, he sometimes switches his position game to game, throw to throw. But let me remind people that on the line is Odyssey NFL insider Mark Schlereth. Insider Calls brought to you by Old Spice. Men have skin too. Let's start with the Niners. The latest news out here, Mark, is that Kyle Shanahan told the media there's only one guy for sure that isn't playing against the Rams, and it's Brock Purdy. As of right now, how would you handle the situation knowing the 49ers are locked in? And how did you handle the situation your Super Bowl year in Denver with those specifics?
Well, the one year we won it as wild cards. The next year we won it as the first seed overall. But we were a number one seed in 1996 and got our ass kicked in the divisional game by Jacksonville. So it's a very precarious situation, the differentiator between, rest and rust. And listen, I believe that if you're a veteran player and you've played a lot of football, the rest is more beneficial. If you haven't played a lot of football, then it becomes one of those rust things. And I don't think you have to play 3 quarters. I don't even think you have to play at halftime. But sometimes just a quarter of, hey, man, we're going to go out there and we're going to kind of establish who we are, and we're going to put a drive or two together, and we're going to kick somebody in the teeth, and then we're going to get out. I think that's a confidence builder, and I've always felt that way about our teams. I approached the preseason the same way. I wanted you to know if we played in the preseason, that if we met again in the regular season or the playoffs or the Super Bowl, you're going to have your hands full. And so I came out and we just wanted to, kick your ass and then get off the football field. And I think there's an approach to it. That one thing about Kyle, he has the experience of his father, and his father's been through those battles and those wars, and he understands what that is like, and the balancing act that is. And Kyle's been through it as well. So, I will trust the feel he has for his football team, and decisions he makes in regards to who plays and who doesn't. But it is one of those precarious things. Like, defense is different.
Right.
Because defense is, about peeling your ears back and going. Offense, there's a certain amount of precision involved, and you can lose a little bit of that precision if you've taken too much time off. So I'm not saying I have the right equation or answer or whatever, but I know it's a difficult decision for a lot of coaches.
No doubt. Mark, let me get your expertise on the Niners, because I was a guy thinking I think they're the best team going into that Christmas game against Baltimore, and I was shocked. I issued an apology to Lamar, Harbaugh for taking them lightly, but do you think any NFC team like Dallas, Detroit, the Rams, or even Philly, and I know they're limping, can take anything from that game tape and implement it in the playoffs if they meet the Niners to make things more difficult, or are they not the Ravens and they can't?
Well, let me just say this. I did a whole breakdown today. It'll probably be out tomorrow on the Stinking Truth podcast. I call it the Leftover Show. And I break down all the stuff off my boards that I didn't necessarily get into the broadcast. And so for you Niner fans, Stinking Truth podcast, you're going to want to listen to this. I think it comes out probably tomorrow morning, either tomorrow morning or Friday morning. But check that out. Look at that, because I go into some insight about Brock Purdy and some stuff that he told me that I was like, whoa, like this dude's a different cat than I think most people feel. But let me just say this. As I dug through the coaches' tape preparing for last week, and I have the Niners again this week, by the way. Got the Niners and the Rams this week. But as I dug through that tape, and again, it's not the TD copy, it's the coaches' tape, I walked away saying to myself, if the Niners faced the Ravens 10 times, they beat them 8 times. I thought they kicked their ass. You can't win a game in which you turn it over 5 times. Sorry, ain't going to happen. Now, the Ravens are exceptional. Defensively, they're fast, they're aggressive, they're physical. They're one of the one teams that can match some physicality with the Niners. But I couldn't believe the space the Niners created on offense. I couldn't believe how wide open they got guys. That McCaffrey had over 100 yards rushing. Kittle had over 100 yards receiving. I think Ayuk had 100 yards receiving. They had almost 500 yards of offense. And, oh, by the way, turning it over 5 times means you have 5 less possessions to do that offensively. You realize that, right? The average game is a 12-possession game. So minus 5 possessions, you got 7 possessions. Let's call one of them, because it was a long drive and they turned it over in the red zone. Let's call one of them. Let's call it an 8-possession game. You put almost 500 yards of offense in 3/4 of the possessions you normally would get in a football game. Tell me that's not an ass whooping. I don't care who you are. You're not going to overcome 5 turnovers. Sorry, ain't going to happen. But I walked away from that game after I studied it on coach's tape, where I was like, oh, my gosh. The other thing is, now I'll give the Ravens a ton of credit. They probably dialed up 5 rushes that had Lamar Jackson dead to rights, where they had him sacked in the backfield, hit, and he was able, in those 5 possessions, or those 5 or 6 times, he was able to break loose and cause pain. And there's nothing more frustrating than when you have a guy dead to rights and he is still able to escape and make a play. Like, that drives you crazy as a defense. But, I came away with thinking, like, if I'm game planning against them and we beat them in the Super Bowl, I'm not even planning those blitzes or planning those free rushers. I'm planning on just socking him in the pocket and saying, we're not giving you any escape lanes. We're going to make you throw the ball. And not even about sacking him, just make him throw the ball, because he had 3 or 4 or 5 really errant throws early in that game when the Niners had a 5-0 lead, and they were all from the pocket throws. And so I walked away from that game going, shoot, if I'm San Francisco, I got a game plan. I feel pretty good. Now, apologies to Baltimore because they're kicking people's asses, but I just walked away going, man, I feel pretty good about where San Francisco sits right now.
Insider calls are brought to you by Old Spice Gentleman's Blend Body Wash, providing exfoliation plus 24/7 moisturizing, because men have skin too. Okay, so this is interesting to me. So you watched the game live and you thought, man, Baltimore just owned the 49ers. You looked at it again and said, well, under the circumstances, yes, the 49ers got beat pretty bad, but it wasn't all as bleak as you might think. Don't try to take too much out of it if they meet again. Is that essentially what you're kind of saying?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm saying. Okay. I didn't think it was bleak. I didn't think it was bleak at all. As a matter of fact,
gotcha.
Even Kyle Shanahan said, going back on it, it was like expecting the worst, and you walked out of it going, wow, we did a lot of really good things. Now, you turn the ball over, right?
Sure.
You make a couple of bad decisions as the quarterback. Those things are going to happen to you. But I'm telling you, I walked away expecting one thing, and I walked away feeling like, wow, like San Francisco was really good. Now, I'm not saying Baltimore isn't good; they're a really good team, but it wasn't bleak at all. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you guys a funny story. I was on the plane, and we had a mechanical, and so I had to get up from my seat because they were working over my seat, and the captain came out and asked me. I was just standing in the first class cabin. And the captain came out and goes, oh, you got the game this weekend? I go, yeah, I got the game. And we start talking San Francisco. We start talking Washington. And this lady in the front row, she has no clue who I am. I don't expect her to know me. Is like, the Niners got their ass kicked. They were horrible. The Baltimore. And I go, hey, listen, I looked at the film and they played a lot better. And she's like, what do you know? You don't know anything. They got killed. And I was like, all right. Like, it was almost a full-blown Karen experience in the first-class cabin. So, Yeah, I was just trying to ease her pain, but she didn't want to hear any of it.
Well, let me ask you this. So when the 49ers play the Eagles, they limited Jalen Hurts, and they used this phrase, they caged him. They wanted to cage him, I guess, which meant keep him in front and, prevent why wouldn't you just do that with Lamar Jackson?
Well, I think they probably did.
Okay.
I think they probably tried that, but they kept getting some free guys on him. And to his credit, let me just say about Lamar is not only has he improved as a passer, and he has, but that dude is like, it's very rare when a NFL player makes other NFL players look like they're playing on the JV squad and he came down from varsity to scrimmage them. Like, Lamar does that to pretty much everybody. And it's one of those things you gotta sit back and marvel. You gotta sit back and look at it, because we're talking about the best athletes, the best football players in the world, and he oftentimes breaks ankles. I mean, it's he's just gelatinous. You can't touch him. And it is one of those things where I always marvel at it because as a player, and I played defense all through college before I moved to the offensive side of the ball, when you get a free run like that, you're not just trying to wrap a guy up. You're trying to murder that dude, right? I mean, it's just football. That's the way it works. And when you do that to Lamar, you got to go against your instincts. And you got to almost gather, slow down, and just try to corral him and then bring him down gently. Because if you go full tilt, he's going to make you miss and make you look stupid. And so, but again, that goes against your human nature as a football player. It goes against your instinct as a football player. And I think you almost have to play him without instinct, which is easy to say, and it's easy to draw up on a grease board. But as I always say, that when they draw it up on a grease board and then what it looks like on the grease board versus what it looks like when you're actually in a game, they're two entirely different things. They never look the same. So it's always easy when you're watching film or easy when it's on a grease board, always difficult on the field.
Stink, you got a Super Bowl ring, and I was telling my partner and the fans, the Niners are living right. They've earned the #1 seed, but McCaffrey, he's got a calf issue. Eric Armstead has been out, and I called him just a guy, a jag, a few weeks ago. But Arizona put up 232 on the ground on them, and the run defense hasn't been the same since he's been out. My question is there any question about rest over rust when the Niners, it'll be 3 weeks before they play a meaningful game? Where are you at on that? Because to me, the timing is perfect. Like the Niners need it more than anybody.
Yeah, I think the Niners need it, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And Eric Armstead is one of those guys. Let me just tell you, there are guys that don't necessarily put up stats that completely affect the way you play as an offense. And Armstead is one of those guys. And so you got to get rid of, you got to clear out the sack numbers and the tackles for losses. And sometimes you just got to clear that stuff out. When you break the huddle, you got to find out where that dude is. Like, you got to break the huddle and go, okay, where's 91 and what's our plan for him? And it's really hard to have a plan for him when you got Bosa on the other side. So right. it becomes one of those one-on-one situations where he collapses pockets. And so he may not hit the quarterback or sack the quarterback, but when you collapse the pocket and put an offensive lineman in the lap of the quarterback can't step into a throw, quarterback can't get enough on the throw. It affects the pocket. And those things are almost as valuable as actually getting the guy on the ground. So he's one of those guys that probably doesn't compile as many stats as the Aaron Donalds of the world and those type of guys, but what he does is exceptional for them. And so, I think the rest thing on defense, as I told you, especially with San Francisco, because they're not an overly complex defense. They're not a real complicated group. What they do is they out-hit you and they out-hustle you. That's what they do. And you can be a really good defense if all you do is hustle and tackle well. Show me a defense that tackles well, and I'll show you a defense that limits scoring. And so they're pretty simplistic in their approach, but they play with great leverage, they play with great understanding, they play with great ferocity, and they tackle well. And that's why they're one of the top defenses in football. And they've got great communication, and Fred Warner is as good as it gets. I think he's the best middle linebacker in football. And it's not just about his skill set and his ability to run around and do things. It's about his communication skills and the way he keeps that group together. So you guys got a special team. They're a lot of fun to watch. And I'm telling you, to sit down with the San Francisco 49ers and talk to Kyle and Steve Wilkes and Fred Warner and Brock Purdy, and man, there are very few teams that have that kind of organizational structure and that kind of culture and get the kind of play they get. George Kittle's just kicking people's asses on the end line of scrimmage, blocking defensive ends one-on-one and dominating them. That's special, because there's a lot of tight ends in this league that just refuse to do that stuff.
49er fans, you're listening to Mark Schlereth, host of Stinkin' Truth podcast, and you can take a listen to it. It'll probably be coming out tomorrow. He has a lot to say about the Niners. He was at the game, calling the game, and he talked to a lot of the 49ers, so you're going to want to check that out for sure. He's also got the Rams Niner game this weekend. Try to keep that one interesting for us, okay?
Yeah. Well, you know what? We'll have a good time. And I tell you what, like I said, that Leftovers podcast, I dropped some stuff that Purdy told me that you guys could be really interested in.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Appreciate it.
Happy New Year, man.
Purdy, you got it.
Yes,
Take
sir.
care.
Mark Schlereth. That's right. He does the Stinking Truth podcast, but then he's got the leftovers.
What do you think Purdy could have told him? This is how
Debo finally started to run a route.
Look at you.
No, seriously. Hey, you've really unlocked Debo. He's finally running routes with precision.
Have we not met? You guys probably touched on it yesterday.
Hold on.
Who? See, this is where my fangs
That was
come out.
that was Odyssey NFL insider Mark Schlereth. Insider Calls brought to you by Old Spice. Hey, men have skin too.